Somewhere, right now, someone is being tested without knowing it. A coworker drops a sharp comment in a meeting, timed perfectly to see who flinches. A family member brings up an old wound at exactly the wrong moment, watching closely for the reaction it produces. A stranger online writes something designed purely to bait a response, then waits, refreshing the page, hungry for the outburst that almost always comes. Most people fail this test every single day without ever realizing a test was even happening. They react instantly, they explain themselves anxiously, they engage with things that were never worth their time in the first place, and in doing so, they hand over a small piece of their power to anyone patient enough to notice the pattern and exploit it. 500 years ago, a quiet, watchful observer of Renaissance politics named Niccolò Machiavelli studied this exact dynamic among princes, courtiers, and rivals, locked in a constant, subtle war for influence, and he arrived at a conclusion that remains almost shockingly relevant today. The people who survived, who kept their power, who could not be baited, cornered, or worn down, were rarely the loudest people in the room. They were the ones who had mastered a discipline so simple to describe and so difficult to practice that most people never manage it in an entire lifetime. Never react, never explain, just ignore. Tonight, on The Hidden Mind, we are breaking down 7 dark, effective psychological tricks built entirely around that discipline, and by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the calmest person in the room is so often the most dangerous one to underestimate, and the hardest one to ever truly corner. Welcome to The Hidden Mind, the channel dedicated to uncovering the real mechanics of power, psychology, and influence, hiding beneath the surface of everyday life, the patterns most people walk past every single day without ever learning to notice them clearly. If you are new here, get comfortable, because this is not a channel built around comfortable, easy answers. We look directly at the parts of human behavior most people prefer to avoid discussing, and we turn them into tools you can actually use to protect yourself and think more clearly about the people around you. Today's video pulls apart one of the most psychologically potent philosophies to ever come out of Machiavelli's writing, a 3-part discipline that has quietly shaped how the most composed, most difficult to manipulate people in history have moved through conflict, provocation, and betrayal. Never react, never explain, just ignore. We are going to break this philosophy down into 7 distinct, dark psychology tricks, each one showing you exactly how to apply this discipline in your own relationships, your own workplace, and your own daily life. This is not comfortable material, and some of what we discuss today will challenge the instincts you have relied on your entire life. The instinct to defend yourself the moment you are challenged, the instinct to explain yourself the moment you are questioned, the instinct to engage the moment someone tries to pull you into conflict, instincts that likely feel so automatic by now that you have probably never once stopped to question where they actually came from. But comfort has never protected anyone from being manipulated, and this channel exists specifically to close that gap. Before we begin, I want to ask you for a few small things that genuinely matter to this channel and the growing community around it. If today's video gives you even one moment of real clarity, take a couple of seconds and hit the like button. It is the simplest way to help this video reach more people who need it. Leave a comment below and tell us honestly which of these 7 tricks you think you personally need to work on the most. We read every single comment, and they genuinely shape what we build next here on The Hidden Mind. If you know someone who reacts too quickly, who over-explains everything to people who do not deserve the explanation, or who keeps handing their power away to people who do not respect it, share this video with them. It might be exactly the shift in thinking they have been needing. And if you have not yet subscribed to The Hidden Mind, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications now, because we release a new deep dive into power, psychology, and human nature every single week. Finally, if this channel provides real value to you, please consider supporting our work directly with a super thanks using the button below this video. Every single contribution genuinely helps us keep building this project. Now, let's step into the discipline that made Machiavelli's most admired leaders so difficult to break. The logic behind 3 simple words. Before we walk through the 7 tricks individually, it is worth understanding exactly why this deceptively simple 3-part discipline carries so much genuine psychological weight. Because on the surface, never react, never explain, just ignore, sounds almost too basic to matter. That apparent simplicity is precisely what makes it so difficult to master, and precisely why so few people actually manage to live by it consistently, even after they understand it intellectually. Think about what actually happens inside your body and mind the instant someone provokes you, insults you, or tries to destabilize you. There is a surge, a rush of heat through your chest, a sudden pull toward defending yourself, correcting the record, or making the other person understand exactly why they are wrong. This surge is not a personal weakness unique to you. It is a deeply wired feature of human psychology, shaped by millions of years of evolution that once made rapid reaction to threat a matter of survival. But in the world of modern social conflict, workplace politics, and everyday manipulation, this same ancient wiring becomes a liability because it makes you predictable, and predictable people are considerably easier to provoke, manipulate, and exploit than people whose reactions cannot be reliably anticipated in advance. Machiavelli did not have access to modern psychology, but he had something arguably more valuable: decades of direct observation of real political actors locked in real, high-stakes struggles for survival and power. He watched leaders who could not control an instant reaction lose everything within months of losing their composure in front of the wrong audience. He watched leaders who felt compelled to explain and justify every single decision slowly get worn down by critics who used those explanations as ammunition. And he watched a rare few, the ones who mastered silence, restraint, and strategic indifference, rise and hold on to power for far longer than anyone around them expected. This is the foundation for everything we are about to discuss today. Every reaction you offer instantly is information handed freely to whoever provoked you. Every explanation you give to someone who has not earned it becomes material that can be twisted and used against you later. Every provocation you engage with, no matter how small, gets elevated to your level simply because you chose to respond to it. Silence, restraint, and strategic indifference are not passive qualities. They are some of the sharpest tools a person can wield, and almost nobody is ever taught how to use them properly. Let's break down the 7 tricks. Trick 1. The power of the pause. Never react before the storm passes. The first trick is the foundation everything else in this video builds upon, and it concerns the razor-thin moment between provocation and response. The moment most people never even notice exists because it passes so quickly it feels instantaneous. Picture a courtroom of Renaissance advisors gathered around a ruler, and one clever, calculating courtier makes a subtle, cutting remark designed to undermine that ruler's authority in front of the entire room. Every eye turns to see what happens next. A weak ruler explodes immediately, defends himself loudly, perhaps even threatens the courtier on the spot, and in doing so, reveals precisely how easy he is to provoke, and precisely which words work best to destabilize him the next time. A different kind of ruler, the kind Machiavelli studied and consistently admired for genuine strategic effectiveness, simply lets a long, heavy silence settle over the room, holds the courtier's gaze without a flicker of visible reaction, and then continues the conversation exactly as though nothing had been said at all. Which of these two men held more real power in that room by the time the meeting ended? The second one, every single time, without exception. Here is the psychological mechanism behind why this works so reliably. A mechanism modern behavioral science has confirmed again and again since Machiavelli's era. A provocation is, whether the provoker realizes it consciously or not, a test, an experiment designed to gather information about you. Your reaction becomes data, revealing exactly what wounds are still tender, exactly which levers can be pulled to control your emotional state in future interactions. Every instant reaction you offer confirms this data freely, handing the provoker a working blueprint for how to destabilize you again later. But when you refuse to react instantly, when you meet provocation with a genuine, unhurried pause, you deny that data completely, and you create something else entirely, a discomfort that settles onto the provoker instead, because most people who go looking for reactions are quietly starving for exactly that outcome, and when it does not arrive, the silence becomes a mirror, reflecting their own aggression directly back at them, with nowhere else for it to land. Consider how deeply unsettling genuine, unhurried silence actually is. Try arguing with someone who calmly refuses to argue back. Try provoking someone who simply watches you, entirely unbothered, waiting without any visible urgency at all. It creates real, tangible discomfort, and that discomfort is not accidental. It is the entire strategic value of the pause. This does not mean becoming passive or permanently silent, and this distinction matters enormously. There is a sharp difference between staying quiet out of fear and staying quiet because you are deliberately choosing not to hand over information yet. Fearful silence shrinks the body, lowers the eyes, apologizes with its posture, even without words. Strategic silence does the opposite. It holds steady, takes its time, and lets the tension in the room stretch until the other party is the one who eventually breaks first, uncomfortable with a silence they cannot read or control. Building this skill starts with a genuinely simple, repeatable habit. The next time someone says something specifically designed to provoke you, resist the urge to respond within the first 60 seconds, not with a single word. Let the pause stretch uncomfortably. Notice the pull rising in your chest to correct them, to defend yourself, to prove your point immediately, and simply do not act on that pull yet. In that gap, that deliberate pause, you take back exactly the power the provocation was designed to strip away from you. Trick 2. Guard your reasons like a locked vault. Never explain yourself to people who haven't earned it. The second trick pushes the discipline further, directly into the second pillar of our core philosophy: never explain. There is an uncomfortable truth about explanation, that modern culture, with its constant emphasis on transparency and open communication, tends to obscure almost entirely. That every explanation you offer is raw material, and raw material can always be reshaped, twisted, and turned into a weapon by anyone motivated enough to do so. When you explain a decision to someone who genuinely respects you and asks in good faith, that explanation strengthens the relationship. But when you explain the exact same decision to someone actively looking for a way to undermine you, someone fishing for inconsistencies, or gathering ammunition for a future argument, every single word you offer becomes another brick in a wall being built specifically to trap you. Machiavelli watched this dynamic play out constantly in the political intrigue surrounding him. Leaders who felt obligated to justify every choice to every critic remained permanently on the defensive, perpetually explaining themselves to people who had no genuine authority to demand that explanation in the first place. Meanwhile, leaders who made decisive moves and declined to justify themselves to people who had not earned that access projected a fundamentally different, considerably more commanding kind of presence. There is something genuinely unsettling, in the best possible sense, about a person who does not feel compelled to justify their choices to every single critic who questions them. It signals a self-assurance that does not depend on external validation to feel secure. Contrast this with the habitual over-explainer, the person who feels a nervous compulsion to account for every small decision, every absence, every preference, no matter how minor. This tendency, however well-intentioned, tends to read as insecurity to the people watching, and worse, it invites scrutiny, because the more you explain, the more surface area you offer for people to dissect, question, and pick apart. This is especially dangerous with genuinely manipulative people who are frequently skilled at using someone's own words against them, finding the one inconsistency, the one soft spot, and using it to make an entirely reasonable person appear foolish or dishonest. Refusing to explain yourself to people who have not earned that access denies manipulative people the raw material they depend on. This does not mean withholding honesty from the people who genuinely matter in your life. Your close family, your trusted friends, colleagues who have earned your confidence. These relationships absolutely deserve thoughtful, honest answers from you. The discipline applies specifically to the far larger category of people who demand explanation not out of genuine care, but out of a desire to judge, control, or destabilize you. The nosy acquaintance who insists you justify a personal decision. The critical relative who demands you defend a choice that is frankly none of their concern. The online stranger who demands you defend a boundary you have every right to hold without justification. To all of these people, the single most powerful response available is often a calm, simple, unbothered statement of your position, without the trailing paragraph of justification that habit so often produces. The first time you resist that urge, it will feel genuinely uncomfortable, Because most of us are conditioned to believe withholding explanation is rude or will provoke anger. Sometimes, initially, it does. But over time, something remarkable happens. People stop demanding explanations from you nearly as often because they sense, correctly, that you are not the kind of person who caves under pressure to justify yourself, and your boundaries become solid and respected, not because you argued for them, but simply because you held them without asking for anyone's permission. Trick 3. Starve what you don't feed. Just ignore the bait instead of taking it. The third trick moves the discipline into its final pillar, just ignore, and it rests on a brutal, unglamorous truth about human behavior that Machiavelli understood centuries before modern psychology gave it a formal name. Attention functions as a form of currency. Nearly every interaction you offer another person, whether a glance, a reply, a laugh, or an argument, is a kind of payment, and when someone is trying to provoke, manipulate, or destabilize you, what they are almost always seeking, whether consciously or not, is exactly that payment, because your attention proves they matter to you, proves they can occupy real space in your mind, proves they hold at least some measure of control over your emotional state. Once you understand this clearly, an entire category of conflict in your life becomes remarkably easy to diffuse. You simply stop paying. Consider the political rivals Machiavelli observed throughout his career, men who spread rumors, planted insults through intermediaries, or staged public provocations specifically designed to bait a visible reaction. The princes who felt compelled to respond to every slight, every rumor, every whispered accusation, burned enormous amounts of political capital, defending themselves against attacks that, left entirely alone, would have quietly burned out on their own within weeks. But the princes who understood strategic ignoring, who simply refused to dignify certain attacks with any response whatsoever, starved those attacks of the oxygen they needed to survive at all. A rumor met with silence tends to die from a lack of interest. A rumor met with a furious, visible response becomes a headline, a story people repeat for months, precisely because the reaction gave it fuel it never had on its own. This dynamic is happening around you constantly, in your workplace, your family, your social feed. Someone posts something specifically engineered to bait a reaction from you. Someone in a meeting makes a comment designed to test whether you will publicly take the bait and argue. Someone in your personal life resurrects an old grievance, not because they genuinely want resolution, but because your visible discomfort gives them a sense of control they may not otherwise have in their own life. Strategic ignoring means recognizing these attempts for exactly what they are and declining to bite. This is a genuinely deeper discipline than the pause we discussed in Trick 1, because strategic ignoring can extend far longer than a single moment, sometimes indefinitely. It means not engaging with the online provocateur at all, not even to correct a factual error, because that correction is itself the payment they were fishing for in the first place. It means not answering a coworker's passive-aggressive email with a defensive reply, but simply continuing your work as though the tone did not register, forcing them either to escalate obviously, exposing their behavior clearly, or to abandon the tactic entirely because it visibly is not working. Some people thrive specifically on being reacted to angrily, because negative attention can feel, to a certain kind of person, even more satisfying than positive attention, since it proves they hold real control over your emotional state. When you genuinely, strategically ignore this person, redirecting your focus toward things that actually deserve it, you remove the exact fuel their behavior depends on, and without an audience, the performance eventually stops on its own. Trick 4. Become unreadable. Keep your face neutral while your mind stays sharp. The fourth trick moves beneath the visible behaviors we have discussed so far, and into the internal discipline that quietly makes every other trick in this video possible in the first place. You cannot practice the pause, strategic ignoring, or refusing to over-explain if your emotions are visibly running the entire show behind the scenes. Machiavelli's political landscape was defined by sudden reversals, betrayals, and shifting alliances, and the leaders who survived that landscape shared a specific, almost unnerving trait, an ability to remain composed under real pressure that would have shattered most other people entirely. This composure was never about feeling nothing internally, and this distinction matters more than almost anything else in this entire video. It is about creating a genuine, deliberate gap between the emotion you feel internally and the behavior you display externally. And that gap is where all real strategic power actually lives. Picture the surface of a deep lake during a violent storm. On the surface, the water might remain perfectly still, reflecting the sky like glass. But far beneath that calm surface, powerful currents can be moving in response to forces the observer on the shore never sees at all. This is the exact image worth holding on to while practicing this discipline. You are allowed to feel the full sting of an insult, the heat of anger, the ache of betrayal, deeply and completely in your internal experience. What this discipline asks is simply that this internal turbulence does not dictate your external behavior in the exact moment it arises. A practical technique here traces directly back to Machiavellian strategy, and you can begin using it immediately. When a strong emotional reaction rises in response to a provocation, mentally label the emotion without acting on it, silently noticing this is anger or this is hurt, without allowing that label to translate immediately into words or visible action. This small pause, this act of naming rather than becoming fused with the emotion, creates exactly the gap needed for a controlled, deliberate response rather than an impulsive one. Machiavelli understood something crucial about how other people perceive emotional detachment. Anyone who cannot accurately read your emotional state loses a genuine amount of leverage over you. If your face, your voice, and your behavior clearly broadcast exactly how upset, hurt, or rattled you are, anyone paying attention gains a working map of your vulnerabilities. But if your external presentation remains steady regardless of the internal storm, you become considerably harder to read, predict, and therefore manipulate. This is precisely why skilled negotiators, skilled leaders, and skilled strategists throughout history have cultivated what looks, from the outside, like almost inhuman calm under real pressure. It is not that they feel nothing, it is that they have trained themselves, through deliberate and often difficult practice, to separate genuine internal experience from external strategic behavior. There is a warning worth attaching here, because this discipline taken too far, practiced with no release valve at all, can curdle into genuine emotional suppression, which carries real psychological costs over time. The goal is never to permanently bury your emotions as though they do not exist. It is to delay their expression until a time and place of your own choosing, ideally in private, with people you genuinely trust, or through healthy outlets like physical activity, journaling, or honest conversation with someone who has earned the right to see you fully unguarded. Trick 5. Let them underestimate the silence. Turn being overlooked into an advantage. The fifth trick concerns something genuinely counterintuitive about the value of being underestimated, and it is one of the darker, more calculating pieces of Machiavelli's philosophy, worth discussing honestly rather than softening it into something more comfortable than it actually is. Machiavelli observed that people who reveal the full scope of their intentions, capabilities, and plans too early, before the right moment arrives, consistently lose whatever strategic advantage they might otherwise have possessed. He noted, through repeated example, that being underestimated, dismissed as quiet, unremarkable, or simply not paying close attention, was frequently a considerably safer, considerably more useful position than being clearly recognized as a serious threat from the very beginning. Think about how naturally most people scan a room and instinctively identify who seems important, who seems dangerous, who seems worth watching closely, based almost entirely on visible confidence, volume, and outward assertiveness. This instinctive scanning consistently misses the person who has deliberately chosen to remain quiet, composed, and unremarkable on the surface, precisely because that person understands something the loud, visibly assertive people in the room do not. That being watched closely limits your freedom of movement, while being overlooked entirely expands it considerably. Consider how this plays out in ordinary modern situations far removed from Renaissance court politics. In a negotiation, the person who reveals genuine excitement, genuine urgency, or genuine desperation too visibly hands the other party an enormous amount of leverage, while the person who remains quietly composed, giving away nothing through their outward presentation, retains considerably more room to maneuver toward a favorable outcome. In a competitive workplace, the person who loudly announces every ambition and every strategic move invites active resistance and quiet sabotage from rivals who now know exactly what to guard against, while the person who works quietly, letting results speak rather than announcements, often advances considerably further before anyone realizes they should have been paying closer attention all along. This trick asks you to consider, honestly, where in your own life visible assertiveness might actually be working against your genuine interests, where quietly allowing yourself to be underestimated, at least temporarily, might create considerably more room to maneuver than loudly announcing your intentions and capabilities before the moment is genuinely right to reveal them. This does not mean becoming permanently invisible, hiding your genuine talents and ambitions indefinitely out of pure caution. It means developing a genuine sense of timing, and understanding that there is real strategic value in choosing carefully when to reveal your full capability and when to remain quietly composed, letting others draw whatever conclusions they draw about your limitations, while you continue building toward outcomes they never saw coming because they were never paying close enough attention in the first place. Trick 6. Make reactions costly. Attach a price to anyone who tries to provoke you. The sixth trick concerns the deliberate cultivation of consequence, and it moves this discipline from pure restraint into something considerably more active and, frankly, considerably more ruthless. Machiavelli understood that restraint alone, without any accompanying consequence attached to repeated provocation, could eventually be misread by persistent provocateurs, not as strategic composure, but as genuine weakness, an invitation to keep testing and pushing indefinitely without ever encountering real resistance. The genuinely dangerous, difficult to manipulate people Machiavelli studied most closely understood something crucial about this dynamic: that restraint needed to be paired, eventually and selectively, with a real, tangible cost attached to persistent provocation, so that anyone testing their composure repeatedly eventually learned that doing so was simply not worth the price. Consider how this principle applies directly to ordinary modern conflict. A coworker who repeatedly undermines you in meetings, testing to see whether you will react publicly, needs to eventually encounter a genuine consequence for that behavior. Whether that consequence takes the form of a direct, private confrontation that makes the cost of continuing clear, a documented pattern raised appropriately through proper channels, or a simple, deliberate withdrawal of cooperation and goodwill that this person has come to rely on without realizing it. Restraint without any eventual consequence teaches a persistent provocateur that provocation is free, entirely without cost, and people who learn that a specific behavior is free tend to continue that behavior indefinitely, precisely because nothing has ever taught them otherwise. This trick requires genuine strategic judgment about timing, because attaching consequence too early, before genuine restraint has been demonstrated, can appear reactive and impulsive rather than deliberate and controlled. But attaching consequence too late, after a pattern of provocation has been allowed to continue entirely unchecked for far too long, teaches the exact opposite lesson: that you can be provoked indefinitely without any cost whatsoever to the person doing the provoking. The genuinely dangerously smart application of this trick involves developing a clear, honest internal sense of when restraint has served its strategic purpose, allowing you to observe a pattern clearly and respond without impulsive emotion, and when the moment has arrived, to attach a real, proportionate consequence to behavior that has clearly demonstrated itself to be a persistent, deliberate pattern rather than an isolated incident. This is not about becoming vindictive or disproportionately punitive toward people who make a single mistake or offer a single moment of thoughtless provocation. Everyone deserves reasonable grace for isolated incidents. It is specifically about recognizing genuine, repeated patterns of deliberate provocation and ensuring that those patterns eventually encounter a real cost, so that the people testing your composure learn, through direct experience rather than empty warning, that doing so is simply not a strategy that continues working indefinitely against you. Trick 7. Outlast, don't outfight. Use patience as your final weapon. The seventh and final trick brings together everything we have discussed today into a single, unifying discipline that Machiavelli returned to again and again throughout his writing: the genuine, strategic power of patience deployed deliberately over time. Machiavelli understood something about conflict resolution that remains genuinely difficult for most people to accept even today. That most conflicts, left to run their natural course, tend to be won not by whoever reacts fastest or fights hardest in the initial moment of confrontation, but by whoever can sustain their position the longest, whoever does not need an immediate resolution, whoever can let circumstances shift naturally in their favor over an extended period of time, rather than forcing a premature confrontation that might not resolve favorably in the moment it occurs. Consider how many of the political conflicts Machiavelli observed throughout Renaissance Italy resolved specifically in favor of whichever party was simply willing and able to wait longer than their opponent, who did not require an immediate resolution, and who could allow circumstances to develop naturally, over months or even years, rather than forcing a confrontation that might have gone considerably worse if pursued impatiently in the initial heat of the moment. This principle of patience as a genuine weapon connects directly back to every single trick discussed throughout today's video. The pause we discussed in Trick 1 exercises patience across the smallest possible unit of time, a single interaction. Strategic ignoring, discussed in Trick 3, exercises patience across a considerably longer span, allowing manufactured drama to burn itself out entirely rather than feeding it with immediate engagement. Machiavelli grasped an important truth about human psychology centuries before it was studied formally: that most people engaged in conflict or provocation are operating on a relatively short internal time horizon, wanting resolution now, wanting validation now, wanting the satisfaction of a visible reaction now. This impatience is itself a genuine, exploitable vulnerability, because a person requiring immediate resolution frequently makes concessions, reveals information, or takes actions they would never take if genuinely willing to simply wait and let a situation develop entirely on its own natural timeline. The person capable of genuine patience, feeling no internal pressure to force an immediate resolution, holds a considerable structural advantage over everyone else still operating on impatient, urgent internal timescales. Consider how this applies practically to your own life. Picture a situation where someone has genuinely wronged you, spread a false rumor, or treated you unfairly in a way that eventually deserves some real consequence. The impatient response confronts them immediately, publicly, and often emotionally, in a way that feels satisfying in the moment, but frequently backfires, escalating the conflict and providing them justification to paint you as the unreasonable party. The patient, Machiavellian response involves waiting, observing, gathering a complete understanding of the full situation, and choosing your moment and method of response with genuine, deliberate care, sometimes waiting weeks or even months for the circumstances where your eventual response will be maximally effective and minimally costly to yourself. This patience is never simple passivity, and that distinction matters enormously. It is an active, deliberate strategic choice to withhold action until timing and method will produce the best possible outcome, rather than a passive resignation to simply accepting mistreatment indefinitely without any eventual response at all. Bringing the 7 tricks together. Having walked through all 7 of these dark psychology tricks individually, it is worth stepping back to understand how they function together as a coherent, unified philosophy, rather than 7 isolated techniques applied randomly across different situations. Never react instantly, because your immediate emotional response is genuinely valuable information you do not want to hand over freely to anyone testing you. Guard your reasons like a locked vault, because every explanation offered to people who have not earned that access becomes raw material that can be used against you later. Starve what you refuse to feed, because attention functions as currency, and manufactured provocations deserve none of your payment. Become genuinely unreadable, because the gap between what you feel internally and what you display externally is precisely where all real strategic power lives. Let yourself be underestimated when strategically useful, because being clearly recognized as a threat too early costs you the freedom of movement that quiet composure provides. Make repeated provocation genuinely costly, because restraint without any eventual consequence teaches persistent provocateurs that testing you carries no real price. And treat patience as your final, decisive weapon. because the person capable of genuinely waiting, of playing the considerably longer game, holds a structural advantage over anyone still trapped in the urgency of immediate resolution. Woven together, these 7 principles create something considerably more powerful than any single trick applied in isolation. A genuine, difficult-to-manipulate composure that makes you significantly harder to provoke, exploit, or control by the people around you who have, until now, relied on predictable reactions, freely offered explanations, and easy access to your attention and emotional energy. Applying this discipline without losing your humanity. Understanding these 7 tricks intellectually is a meaningful first step, but actually living by them, especially during a genuine moment of provocation, betrayal, or real pressure, is an entirely different challenge that deserves a few more minutes of honest attention before we close today's video. The first step involves building genuine awareness of the trigger moment itself, that razor-thin gap between provocation and reaction that most people never consciously notice because it passes so quickly it feels instantaneous. Your first task, starting today, is simply noticing that this gap exists at all, without necessarily trying to change your behavior yet, because awareness of the gap is the essential prerequisite for ever gaining genuine control over what happens inside it. The second step involves practicing what we might call the deliberate pause, a conscious decision to let a beat or two pass before responding to anything that provokes a strong emotional reaction in you. Something as simple as taking one slow breath, or waiting until a full thought has completed itself internally before letting any words leave your mouth at all. Over time, this deliberate pause becomes genuine habit and eventually becomes almost automatic, a reflex that protects you from the impulsive reactions that once quietly cost you real power in difficult interactions. The third step involves auditing your own explanatory habits honestly, paying close attention over the coming week to how often you find yourself explaining, justifying, or defending decisions to people who did not actually ask in good faith, or who frankly have no genuine standing to demand that explanation from you at all. The fourth step involves learning to distinguish, in real time, between provocations that genuinely deserve your engagement and provocations that deserve strategic ignoring, a skill that sharpens considerably with honest reflection after each conflict about whether your engagement actually served your genuine interests. The fifth step involves practicing genuine patience, specifically in situations where your entire body and mind are urging immediate action, starting small, committing to waiting a full 24 hours before sending an angry message, posting an emotional reaction, or confronting someone the instant a conflict first arises, and observing how differently the situation often looks once that pause has fully passed. None of these 5 steps require becoming a different person overnight, and none of them ask you to abandon your genuine warmth, honesty, or connection with the people who have actually earned it. What they ask is a gradual, deliberate rewiring of your default response to provocation, manipulation, and pressure, moving you steadily away from the reactive, over-explaining, easily read version of yourself, and toward the calm, strategic, genuinely difficult to manipulate version of yourself that Machiavelli spent his entire life studying and describing in the leaders he admired most for their genuine effectiveness. A final warning before we close. There is one last, genuinely important thing worth saying clearly before today's video ends, because it would be irresponsible to hand you tools this effective without also addressing the real risk that accompanies them. Power of any genuine kind, and everything discussed throughout this video is genuinely a form of power, can be used to protect yourself, or it can be used to unnecessarily harm people who never deserved that treatment in the first place. Machiavelli's philosophy has earned its dark, controversial reputation over the centuries precisely because it has been misused repeatedly by people who applied these principles not for genuine self-protection, but for cold, deliberate exploitation of people who trusted them and never should have been treated that way. We are not sharing these 7 tricks today so that you can become someone who manipulates, deceives, or coldly exploits the people in your life for personal gain. We are sharing them so that you can recognize clearly when they are being used against you, and so that you can build a version of yourself that cannot be so easily provoked, drained, or controlled by the people around you who do not genuinely have your best interests at heart. There remains a meaningful, important difference between using silence, strategic ignoring, and controlled detachment as a shield protecting your own peace and energy, and using these same tools as a weapon deployed coldly against people who trust you and genuinely deserve better from you. We trust that you understand clearly which side of that line you want to stand on, and we genuinely hope this video helps you build a calmer, considerably more composed, and considerably more strategically minded version of yourself, one that the people around you can no longer manipulate quite as easily as they once could, and one that still knows exactly how to be genuinely warm, generous, and present with the people who have actually earned that version of you. Why this discipline feels so unnatural at first. If parts of today's video have felt genuinely difficult to imagine actually practicing in your own life, that difficulty is worth naming honestly, because it explains exactly why this discipline remains so rare, even among people who understand it intellectually, the moment they hear it explained clearly. Human beings are, at a fundamental biological level, wired for rapid response. The nervous system evolved across an enormous span of time in environments where hesitation genuinely could mean the difference between survival and death, where a delayed reaction to a genuine physical threat carried consequences far more severe than anything most of us encounter in the ordinary social provocations of modern life. This ancient wiring does not simply switch off because you have watched a video explaining why restraint serves you better in a modern social context. It remains active, deeply embedded, and genuinely difficult to override, especially in moments of real emotional intensity, when the pull toward instant reaction feels less like a choice and more like an involuntary reflex completely outside your control. This is precisely why the discipline described throughout today's video cannot be adopted through simple intellectual agreement alone. It requires genuine, repeated practice, ideally starting with lower-stakes situations where the cost of an imperfect attempt remains small, before gradually extending the same discipline into higher-stakes moments where real provocation, real betrayal, or real conflict tests whether the practice has actually taken root. There is also a deeper, more emotionally complicated reason this discipline feels unnatural for many genuinely kind, conscientious people specifically. Many of us were raised, whether explicitly or through subtle example, to believe that withholding a reaction, declining to explain ourselves, or ignoring a provocation entirely is somehow rude, cold, or dishonest, a violation of the open, transparent communication we have been taught to value as a core marker of good character. This belief, while well-intentioned, frequently produces exactly the vulnerability this entire video has been working to address. A person who feels genuinely obligated to react, explain, and engage with every single provocation directed at them, regardless of whether that provocation was ever offered in good faith to begin with. Releasing this belief, even partially, even only in the specific, bounded situations this video has described, can feel like abandoning a core part of your identity as a considerate, transparent, emotionally honest person. But it is worth clarifying directly, one final time, that this discipline is not actually in conflict with genuine emotional honesty, considerate communication, or authentic connection with the people who genuinely deserve those qualities from you. It is specifically about recognizing that these qualities, offered indiscriminately to absolutely everyone regardless of their intentions toward you, become exactly the vulnerability that manipulative and provocative people rely upon, and that protecting these qualities through genuine discernment ultimately allows them to survive and flourish far longer than they would if offered freely to people who were only ever going to exploit them. Machiavelli did not develop this philosophy from a position of comfortable theoretical distance. He developed it after watching his own considerable openness and trust cost him his position, his reputation, and very nearly his life, in a political environment that punished naivety with genuine, sometimes fatal consequence. The philosophy he ultimately committed to paper was, in a very real sense, the hard-won wisdom of a man who paid an enormous personal price to understand exactly how these dynamics actually operate, so that others might learn the same lessons without needing to pay that identical price themselves. This is ultimately why we return to his work again and again here on The Hidden Mind, not to strip away your genuine warmth or capacity for authentic connection, but to offer you the considerable protection of understanding these patterns clearly, before life forces that same understanding upon you through painful, costly personal experience. There is one more thing worth naming honestly before we move toward today's close. Practicing this discipline for the first time tends to produce an early, somewhat uncomfortable phase where you feel almost too controlled, too guarded, as though you have swung too far away from the open, reactive version of yourself you have always known. This phase is genuinely normal, and it is not where this discipline is ultimately meant to leave you. The real goal of everything discussed today is not permanent, blanket suspicion of every person and every interaction in your life, but a considerably sharper discernment. One precise enough that you eventually feel entirely comfortable relaxing fully into the relationships that have actually earned your full openness. Specifically because you have become so much better at recognizing, quickly and accurately, which relationships those genuinely are. Give yourself real permission to move through this initial, awkward phase without mistaking it for your permanent destination, and trust that the composure you are building today ultimately serves a life with more genuine security and more sustainable warmth, not less. This is the quiet, often invisible work that separates people who move through conflict and provocation with real strength from people who simply appear strong in the moment and collapse the instant real pressure arrives. And that brings us to the end of today's deep dive into Machiavelli's 7 dark psychology tricks, built entirely around one deceptively simple discipline: never react, never explain, just ignore. Before we close, it is worth remembering that none of these 7 tricks were ever meant to be applied all at once, in every interaction, toward every single person you encounter. They are tools, meant to be picked up deliberately in the specific moments that genuinely call for them, and set back down, just as deliberately, when you are among the people who have earned your full, unguarded openness. Let the pause do its work, before you ever respond to genuine provocation. Guard your reasons like a locked vault, offering explanation only to people who have genuinely earned that access to your reasoning. Starve what you refuse to feed, denying manufactured provocations the attention they were specifically designed to extract from you. Become genuinely unreadable, letting your composure protect the internal emotional experience you are always entitled to feel fully and privately. Let yourself be underestimated when it genuinely serves your interests to remain quietly composed rather than visibly assertive. Make repeated provocation genuinely costly so that persistent testing of your composure eventually meets real, proportionate consequence. And above everything else discussed today, treat patience as your final, decisive weapon, trusting that whoever can wait longest, whoever refuses to force a premature resolution, holds a structural advantage that impulsive urgency simply cannot match. Carry these 7 principles with you, not as permission to become cold or manipulative toward the people who genuinely deserve your warmth and openness, but as a genuine shield, protecting that warmth from the people who would otherwise exploit it freely and repeatedly if you allowed them to. Before you go, I want to ask you once more for a few small things that genuinely matter to this channel. If today's video gave you real clarity about your own patterns and instincts, please take a moment to hit the like button. It costs you nothing and directly helps this video reach the people who need to hear it most. Leave a comment below and tell us honestly which of these 7 tricks resonated with you most, or which one you think you personally need to practice the most. We genuinely read every single comment, and they genuinely shape the direction of future videos here on The Hidden Mind. If you know someone who reacts too quickly, who explains far too much to people who do not deserve it, or who consistently gives their power away too easily in the face of provocation and manipulation, please share this video with them today. It might be exactly the shift in perspective they have been needing. And if you have not yet subscribed to The Hidden Mind, now is the perfect moment. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our weekly deep dives into power, psychology, and the darker mechanics of human influence. Finally, if today's video provided real, genuine value to you, please consider supporting the growth of this channel directly with a super thanks using the button below this video. Every single contribution genuinely helps us continue building content exactly like this for you, week after week, as this community keeps growing. Until next time, remember that the world will keep testing you with provocations designed to make you react, explain, and engage, but you do not have to give it what it is looking for. The people who move through this life the most unbothered, the most difficult to shake, are rarely the ones who feel nothing at all. They are simply the ones who have learned exactly when to let a feeling stay entirely private and exactly when a moment finally calls for something more. This has been The Hidden Mind. Stay composed, stay unreadable, and we will see you again in the next one.